Have you ever wondered why, despite all your efforts, you feel like you're wandering in the dark? Perhaps the goal you're striving for remains elusive, or you're haunted by a sense of inner emptiness, as if something is missing to complete the picture. What follows may be that missing element. Carl Jung believed that there are no coincidences in life. Understanding this principle can lead to answers to questions that have long remained unanswered. The moment of birth is not just the beginning of life's journey, but also the revelation of a deep connection between the individual and the universe. Birth is not a random event, but a collection of signs indicating a person's essence, their motivations, and the obstacles they may encounter along the way. Some may consider this superstition, but Jung, an outstanding thinker in the field of psychology, proved that this idea has a basis. He spoke of the collective unconscious, an invisible network of symbols and archetypal patterns that connect individual existence to something larger. Think about how many times you've overlooked the signs that life sends you. How often have you experienced a deep sense of misunderstanding, the source of which remained unknown? Perhaps attempts were made to fill the inner void with achievements, relationships, or distractions, but nothing brought complete satisfaction. The reason for this inner turmoil may be both simple and profound, a lack of harmony with one's true essence. The key to this lost connection may be hidden in the moment of birth. For millennia, various cultures around the world have believed that the moment a person is born contains important elements that influence their life path. It's important to note that this doesn't imply complete predetermination of fate, but rather indicates that each of us is part of a larger order. Just as the seasons change, each carrying a specific meaning. Winter symbolizes a period of introspection and reflection, spring marks new beginnings, summer embodies self-expression, and autumn calls for reflection on the past. Each person's birthday carries a unique energy that influences their personality traits, decisions, passions, and even fears. The problem is that misunderstanding the principles of this energy can lead to unconscious actions that contradict it. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung noted that many internal conflicts arise precisely from the loss of connection with universal archetypes, the deep structures that shape our perception of the world and behavior. Jung believed that the month of birth reflects the dominant archetypal force that determines a person's potential, as well as the difficulties they will face. This can be compared to a compass. A person who doesn't know how to use it will wander aimlessly, while someone who does will be able to clearly define their path. The question arises, why do some people possess innate leadership qualities, while others exhibit outstanding creative abilities or the ability to empathize? This is not a coincidence. Each person carries a certain energy from birth. Among us are natural pioneers, opening new horizons, overcoming obstacles, and inspiring others. There are also those who are highly sensitive to the feelings of others, deeply experiencing their emotions. These are natural healers offering understanding and comfort. And there are those who constantly ask questions about the meaning of life, striving for the spiritual dimension of existence. But what happens if a person ignores their true nature and tries to play someone else's role? In this case, life will turn into a continuous struggle, like swimming against the current. It's like planting a sunflower in unsuitable soil. Despite all efforts, it won't be able to fully develop. Perhaps this is the feeling experienced by a person trying to conform to standards that are alien to them. However, their true potential is still waiting in the wings. According to Jung, genuine change begins with turning inward and confronting what has long been suppressed. Self-awareness is like turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, things that were previously unnoticed become visible, and what seemed like a threat takes on understandable outlines. It's time for sincere self-analysis and reflection on the significance of the month in which you were born. Imagine that your birth is not just a coincidence, but part of a carefully crafted universal symphony. Consider that every challenge you encounter carries a hidden meaning, and your unique talents and abilities are not a random set of qualities. The key to a happy and fulfilling life lies in deciphering these embedded clues and using them to create the reality you dream of. After all the necessary resources and answers are already within you. You just need to learn how to unlock and apply them. For centuries, outstanding minds, including Carl Jung, have argued that the universe communicates with us through symbolic images and recurring patterns. In ancient times, people sought answers by looking to the heavens, but today we can find them by delving into the depths of our own consciousness. Have you ever noticed that certain seasons affect you more strongly than others? That in some months you feel a surge of energy and inspiration, while in others you feel the need to slow down and retreat? This is not just a coincidence, it is the subtle influence of the energy surrounding your birth that affects your life journey. However, this does not mean that your fate is predetermined. On the contrary, as Jung argued, awareness of these patterns allows us to break out of the vicious cycle of repetitive scenarios and begin to consciously manage our lives, directing them in the desired direction. It is important not to foresee the future, but to know yourself, and based on this knowledge, make informed decisions. Before moving forward, ask yourself a key question. What are you really looking for? The answer may not be obvious yet, but at the end of this journey, you will see yourself in a completely different light. You will realize that everything you have experienced, whether pain, joy, achievements, or disappointments, is part of a grand design. And when this design becomes clear, you will be able to draw valuable lessons even from the most difficult situations. If you feel an inner movement, something you cannot yet define, continue your journey. What you hear in the near future may be the key to unlocking your hidden potential. As Jung once remarked, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. The moment has come. Take fate into your own hands. Now that this connection is realized, prepare yourself. In the next section, we will delve deeper into the topic and explore how the energy of your birth month affects your emotions, decisions, and opportunities. This journey is just beginning. Have you ever felt like you're stuck in an invisible cycle, as if certain situations in life repeat themselves over and over again? Regardless of the effort you put in, it seems that something constantly returns you to the starting point. Perhaps it was an unsuccessful relationship or a job that seemed perfect, but ultimately brought only disappointment. Perhaps it's the constant feeling that you're not in your place, as if the world is moving in one direction and you're relentlessly pulled in the opposite direction. If this sounds familiar, know that you are not alone. Millions of people find themselves in a similar vicious cycle, not understanding the reasons. But Carl Jung left us a valuable key to understanding. What we call fate can be a cosmic dance in which everyone can be not only a dancer, but also a choreographer. Jung argued that the patterns that define our lives are not random, but are part of a deep connection between the individual and the universe. He compared human life to a river full of stones, bends, and obstacles. But the flow of this river is not chaotic. It is shaped by internal and external forces, often invisible, but leaving their mark. One such sign is the moment of our birth. It's not just about the position of the planets or the phases of the moon, but about something deeper, the archetypal energy that reached its peak at the moment of our first breath. Let's imagine for a moment a woman named Anna, a 48-year-old literature teacher. From the outside, her life seems measured and calm, a stable job, a cozy home, 2 grown children, and a loving husband. However, inside she carries a burden that few notice. Since she was 20, she has felt that she is trying to keep up with time, but constantly fails. As soon as things start to improve, something interferes and hinders progress, whether it's a difficult boss, unexpected financial difficulties, or even worse, a feeling of her own inferiority despite all her achievements. She wonders, why is everything so difficult for me? Will this go on forever? Anna does not realize that part of this constant feeling of struggle is closely related to the energy of her birth month. April is a month of fire, and within Anna lies the archetypal energy of pioneers and conquerors, people striving for action, creation, and forward movement. But as Jung argued, every energy has a shadow side. Anna's shadow is impatience and excessive strictness towards herself, a constant desire for more, but at the same time, a feeling that she will never be good enough. Deep within Anna's consciousness, a persistent pattern has taken root, exerting a defining influence on the decisions she makes and her responses to challenges. In this particularity lies the key distinction. However, Anna is not doomed to perpetually repeat this cycle. As Jung asserted, awareness of such patterns paves the way for their transformation. Anna has the capacity to achieve harmony by balancing her insatiable need for continuous movement with moments of conscious stillness and profound self-reflection. Perhaps in time she will come to realize that it is not necessary to shoulder the burden of the entire world, and that true strength may lie in the ability to stop when needed. It is this cosmic dance, the balance between opposing energies residing within each of us, that Jung described. Now let us turn our attention to Roberto, a 57-year-old man who has dedicated his entire life to working in a machine-building company. He is the quintessential breadwinner, a man who has consistently placed the needs of his loved ones above his own desires and aspirations. From a young age, he was convinced that success was synonymous with financial stability and professional recognition. For many years, this approach served him well. Roberto built a successful career, raised his children, and provided financial security for his family. However, as retirement approaches, he is increasingly plagued by a sense of inner emptiness. The achievements that once brought him satisfaction now seem meaningless, and he begins to question the value of everything he has done. Roberto was born in May, a month associated with the energy of seeking security, stability, and establishing a connection between the material and spiritual realms. He spent most of his life in harmony with this positive energy, creating a solid foundation for himself and his family. But, as is well known, every energy has its reverse, its shadow side. In Roberto's case, this shadow manifests as an excessive need for control and a deep fear of the unknown. Confronted with the existential void that inevitably arises with retirement, he realizes that he dedicated his life to creating stability, but never asked himself what truly makes him happy. Jung taught that the unconscious always finds a way to manifest itself, whether through dreams, emotions, or events that occur beyond our control. The emptiness that Roberto is experiencing is not a sign of failure, but rather an invitation to explore the part of himself that he has ignored for many years. He must learn to relinquish control, acknowledge that it is impossible to plan absolutely everything, and, most importantly, believe that unexpected changes can also be wonderful. How do these stories resonate with your own life? Perhaps you too have spent years pursuing a path that seemed right to you, but which did not truly reflect your authentic self. Perhaps you have ignored the signals that your body, mind, and heart have been sending you until they became too loud to ignore. But the good news is that it is never too late to rewrite your story. What Jung called the cosmic dance is not a confinement, but an opportunity to find oneself. Awareness of the forces that shape our lives opens the door to using them productively. A person born in January may realize that their leadership inclinations do not require them to single-handedly solve every problem. Someone born in July can transform their empathy into a consciously managed force, avoiding burnout. As Jung asserted, self-knowledge does not eliminate difficulties, but equips us with the tools to overcome them. When certain patterns begin to emerge in life, a person ceases to feel like a victim of circumstances, becoming the author of their own destiny. Events that seemed inevitable take on meaning, opening up new paths. Recalling moments of life upheaval such as divorce, job loss, or health problems, it is worth viewing them as an invitation to self-discovery and growth. Life is a cosmic dance that requires a balance between accepting challenges and learning from them. This balance begins with understanding the forces that influence us from birth. Regardless of age, self-knowledge is always relevant. The deeper the immersion into one's inner world, the closer one comes to a fulfilling and meaningful life. Making the decision to look inward and learn what energies guide one's life path transforms the cosmic dance from a mysterious force into a faithful ally. In the following, we will discuss identifying these unique energies and using them to transform reality, because, as Jung said, the unconscious always responds to those who are willing to listen. The environment in which a person is born has a huge impact on their personality. Not only the physical space, but also the time of year, the weather, the sounds, all of this becomes part of the invisible story that they carry within themselves. The moment of birth is not just a biological event, but a symbolic invitation into life's journey. Jung believed that the collective unconscious is a psychological reality that connects all people through universal symbols. Birth is the beginning of this connection. The first breath connects a person to the universe, establishing an invisible link between the inner and outer worlds. A lack of understanding of this connection can lead to ignoring the signs that lead to a fulfilling life. It is important to consider whether a person is truly living the life they want, or whether they are stuck in the expectations of others. Isolation from the inner world often arises from a lack of attention to the deep patterns that govern life. Carl Jung warned that neglecting the messages of the unconscious is fraught with their manifestation in a distorted form, through dreams, ailments, or recurring life scenarios. If a person is haunted by the same difficulties or a feeling of fighting an invisible enemy, it may be time to listen to the voice of their own nature. As an example, consider the story of Pedro, who for many years believed he was on the right path. He built a successful career as a manager in a large company, was respected by his colleagues, and had a high income. However, when the prospect of promotion to director arose, he was suddenly overcome by a panic attack. The world that seemed under control collapsed in an instant. The work he loved turned into an unbearable burden, and he was ready to give it all up, not understanding the reason for what was happening. What was the reason for this breakdown? Pedro was born in September, a month associated with the pursuit of perfection and order. From childhood, he was taught responsibility, completing tasks, and striving for the best result in everything. This worked for a long time, but the shadow side of this archetype, which he ignored, gradually began to take over. Pedro was so self-critical that even in his successes, he found no satisfaction, always looking for flaws and mistakes. This constant pressure created internal tension, which eventually broke out. Surely everyone has at least once suppressed their emotions, considering the moment inappropriate, or felt internal discomfort, continuing to move forward out of the need to appear strong. This way of thinking may seem justified, but Jung clearly warned the suppressed does not disappear without a trace, but only hides in the shadows, waiting for the right moment, which most often comes during a crisis. However, a crisis does not necessarily have to be destructive. Self-knowledge can turn it into a turning point. Seeking help, Pedro realized that he did not need to give up his career. He needed to change his attitude towards work, learn compassion for himself, and be able to appreciate his achievements without succumbing to perfectionism. He realized that the pursuit of perfection has two sides. One is the strength that leads to success. The other is paralyzing self-criticism. By balancing this energy, Pedro not only recovered, but also became a more understanding and effective leader, aware of both his own boundaries and the boundaries of others. Ultimately, it all comes down to one fundamental question: what deep archetype invisibly guides the life path of each of us? The importance of realizing this fact should not be underestimated. For example, people born in January or April are often endowed with innate leadership potential and an innovative spirit. Those born in July are distinguished by an increased sensitivity to the emotional state of others, which, however, can lead to emotional exhaustion if they do not learn to control this feature. And those born in December, as a rule, attract attention with their inexhaustible energy and ability to inspire, but sometimes they can stray from the true path in pursuit of external praise. And it is at this stage that the true transformation of personality begins. Think for a moment about the month of your birth. How could it have influenced the decisions you have made throughout your life? Are you living using the bright sides of your archetype, or have you been trapped in its shadow aspects? Perhaps, like a certain Pedro, you feel the presence of some unexplored patterns in your destiny. But do not despair. Awareness of these patterns is the first step towards their transformation. Jung likened the process of self-knowledge to exploring a dark house with a flashlight in hand. You need to muster the courage to illuminate those corners that you are usually afraid to look into. One such corner may be the influence of the environment in which a person was born on the formation of their beliefs. For example, if from childhood it was instilled that success is achieved only through hard work and self-sacrifice, then this idea could take deep root in the mind and be perceived as an unshakable truth. But does this really reflect the life you want to live? The key here is awareness. It's necessary to pause for a moment and ask ourselves, what beliefs have we accepted without proper critical evaluation? Perhaps it has always seemed necessary to be strong, or there was a conviction that one couldn't afford to rest until all goals were achieved. Such beliefs often have their roots in the archetypal energy of the month of birth. However, this does not mean that a person must remain a hostage to them. This is where the power of self-awareness lies, in recognizing these influences and making a conscious decision about how to deal with them. Imagine the following situation. A woman named Elena, 52, has believed all her life that true love is impossible without sacrifice. In every relationship, she put her partner's needs above her own, which led to a recurring cycle of imbalance. The result was always the same: emotional burnout and unrequited feelings. Elena was born in February, a month associated with empathy and emotional healing. The positive side of this energy was manifested in her ability to be a great listener and provide support to others. However, the shadow side was neglecting her own needs, which gradually undermined her self-esteem until she realized this destructive pattern. Ultimately, Eleanor realized that true empathy begins with self-love. Setting personal boundaries is not an act of selfishness, but an act of self-care. And most importantly, she realized that by valuing herself, she can provide healthy support to others. Eleanor's story is a vivid reminder of the importance of self-awareness. In the depths of the human psyche, archetypes appear not as an inevitable fate, but as a potential for self-realization. If an individual feels like a prisoner of recurring life scenarios, it is advisable to ask, what lessons are hidden in these experiences? As the eminent psychologist Carl Jung asserted, the path to healing begins with transforming the perception of difficulties from hostile forces to wise mentors. Before moving on to further research, the reader is invited to share their innermost thoughts in the comments. What stable patterns can be traced in personal experience, possibly related to the month of birth? The significance of such self-analysis should not be underestimated. Sharing experiences opens up the opportunity to discover common experiences with other people, which in turn contributes to collective growth and the search for new paths of development. It is important to remember that each archetype carries a specific purpose. When a person consciously integrates it into their life, the archetype ceases to be a limiting chain and becomes a faithful companion. The next chapter will examine how these archetypes can be used to achieve real change in life and how the shadow aspects of personality can become a source of strength. As Jung said, it is there, where fear dwells, that the greatest power is hidden. Imagine a person comfortably seated in a train car. To an outside observer, it may seem that the train is steadily moving in a straight line, but the reality holds deviations from the course that are invisible to the eye. The passenger thinks that he is in complete control of the situation, but the passage of time relentlessly carries him away from the intended goal. Who among us is not familiar with this feeling? Who has not experienced the feeling that life has turned into an endless routine and, despite all efforts, some omnipotent force directs along a path that was not consciously chosen? If you have ever thought about recurring cycles in relationships, career, or emotional experiences, it is time to realize an important truth. All this is not just a coincidence. As the famous psychologist Carl Jung said, The unconscious not only influences decisions made, but also forms stable recurring patterns of behavior. Ignoring these patterns dooms a person to an eternal return to the starting point. But how to recognize and destroy these ingrained patterns? To illustrate this idea, it is worth telling the story of Mariana. She is 38 years old and a successful marketing professional. At first glance, her life seems perfect: high salary, frequent business trips, a wide social circle. However, there was an area in Mariana's life that always represented a real minefield: romantic relationships. Over the years, she has experienced many romances, each of which began with ardent passion and great hopes, but invariably ended in disappointment and heartache. From her partners, she constantly heard the same words: "You are wonderful, but something is missing." Over time, Mariana began to lean toward the idea that the root of the problem lies within herself. During a therapy session conducted in the spirit of Jungian psychology, a significant event occurred. The patient had a sudden realization. The therapist asked her a question that became the starting point for deep reflection. What do you think is the unifying factor in all your relationships? Initially, Mariana focused on listing the shortcomings of her chosen partners, noting their fear of intimacy, tendency to cheat, and emotional coldness. However, delving into deeper self-analysis, she came to a disturbing discovery. The common denominator in all these stories was her own fear of being rejected. From an early age, Mariana lived with the belief that in order to win love, one must be perfect. This deeply ingrained belief so consumed her mind that she unconsciously chose partners who only confirmed her negative attitudes. Thus, she repeatedly found herself in a painful, vicious circle. This moment of insight became a turning point in her life. As the famous psychologist Carl Jung said, transformation becomes possible only when what is hidden in the unconscious comes to light. For Mariana, this meant the need to rethink her inner history and get rid of destructive beliefs. Whenever she noticed a desire to please others, she began to consciously build boundaries, defending her interests and needs. And what was the result? Instead of seeking approval in the outside world, she learned to ask herself, "What do I really want from this relationship?" In just a few months, the dynamics of her life underwent dramatic changes. She managed to build healthy and harmonious relationships with a person who accepted her as she is, without requiring her to meet any far-fetched ideals. Surely everyone is familiar with the feeling when life seems to be stuck in the same scenarios, beyond our control. It can be monotonous work that does not bring satisfaction, or fading friendships, the reasons for which remain unclear. Sometimes it seems that we are trapped in our own thoughts, going around in circles. However, these repetitions are not random coincidences. They serve as clear signals of internal needs that require our close attention. Carl Jung called this process individuation, a journey to find the true self, involving the integration of all aspects of our personality, including both positive and negative sides. It is interesting to note that a study conducted at Harvard University revealed a striking pattern. About 80% of people unconsciously repeat the same patterns of behavior in their romantic and friendly relationships. This does not mean that they are doomed to failure in their personal lives. Rather, it suggests that many of them live on emotional autopilot, unaware of their underlying motives and needs. At the same time, this study shows that awareness of these recurring patterns can radically change people's lives. As soon as a person begins to understand their typical reactions and patterns of behavior, there are noticeable improvements not only in their relationships with others, but also in their overall mental health and self-esteem. Let's delve into reflections on the cyclical nature of life experience and the possibility of breaking the vicious circle. Has anyone wondered how much the decisions they make are dictated by their own beliefs, and are not an echo of the past, the influence of the environment, or echoes of past traumas? I invite you to share your thoughts and discoveries in the comments. It is likely that other people are facing similar dilemmas, and such an exchange of views can become a connecting link, because deep down we are all connected by invisible threads of common experiences. Carl Jung, exploring universal archetypes, pursued not only academic goals. He believed that these collective symbols and images, inherited from ancestors, live in the depths of our consciousness and can serve as a key to understanding recurring life scenarios. One of the most striking archetypes is the hero, a person who faces difficulties, overcomes them, and returns to the starting point transformed. However, many overlook one important point. Before becoming a hero, it is necessary to recognize the presence of an obstacle. A significant number of people throughout their lives avoid difficulties, preferring to ignore them or remain inactive, hoping for spontaneous resolution of problems. But genuine change begins only when a person ceases to evade challenges and decides to boldly face them head-on. According to Jung's views, the elements we cast into the abyss of the unconscious are not forgotten. By neglecting them, we allow them to subtly shape the course of our lives. The patterns that determine our life path are not punishment, but a call to deeper self-knowledge. By recognizing the hidden beliefs that govern our decisions, we unlock new horizons and gain the ability to consciously create our destiny. The key is to integrate the opposites within ourselves. Instead of suppressing fears or ignoring insecurities, we should embrace them as an integral part of personal growth. Each individual carries both light and dark sides, and true maturity is achieved only when a person learns to accept and balance these two opposites. By questioning outdated patterns, we free ourselves from the shackles of self-doubt and open doors to new opportunities. A person should not be a slave to their subconscious. By turning it into an ally, we initiate a process of profound transformation. The time has come to make a decision, whether to remain captive to old patterns or consciously direct our life in a new direction. The first step towards change is awareness, followed by conscious action. By questioning inner beliefs and rethinking decisions, we launch a deep process of self-realization and spiritual growth. It is believed that in frightening situations lies the potential for the greatest achievements. Life, like a universal choreography, awaits each person to find their personal rhythm and dare to express it in dance. It is in overcoming fears and doubts that one finds hidden reserves and acquires previously unknown power.